looks like about enough. Alright, well, if anyone's watching the VOD of this, since no one's currently in the stream, I'm going to be trying to sculpt the Crux Terminatus onto the shoulder pad. The Dreadnought here is going to be a Deathwing member, and, well, hopefully that makes it look the part. I'll probably be doing Deathwing color schemes. What is this? Maybe not gaming. Gaming works. Well, let's get started. That seems to be mixed enough. So, let's see. Looking at the Crux Terminatus, we have a big circle in the middle of the skull, then the 4 cross parts branching out from it. Okay, it's not too difficult. First, I'm going to start by just blocking out the central shapes. So that's too big. Maybe about half that size. Might still be too big. And we'll be rounding this out and adding more detail to it as we go. We're just trying to get the rough shapes in now. Fine, because no one's watching me. of water here I'm using to wet my fingers, just to make sure the green stuff doesn't get too textured. Okay, so now we have the 4 little wing things that go on the edges. So let's start just blocking those out. I'm going to make the rough shape with my fingers here, just to get it sort of the right triangular shape. And then we'll go in and refine that with our tools a little bit later on. So I got these little things from Amazon. I'm just going to push that into shape. We're kind of going for a flower petal design almost. So we can just cut off some of the excess here. And we've got quite a bit of time until the green stuff starts to harden. Right now it's in the stickiest phase, so sculpting detail is going to be a little bit difficult. But after about an hour or so, it'll have firmed up to the point where sculpting becomes pretty easy. So we really want to just get everything stuck on right now. That way we can use that hour we have to really start refining details. It'll be a little bit difficult now. Yeah, that's kind of okay. So just a rough shape. It's a little bit off center, but we can fix that. We still have time. Just do the same on the other side. And you can see we're getting kind of a big mound of green stuff here in the middle. So what we're going to need to do for that is slowly cut it down. So once we get all 4 of these in, I'll probably take the X-Acto knife and just trim down the middle and cut off the top of that mound, just so we have a little bit less to work with and worry about. No, I'm sure this is different from what a lot of other painters and sculptors do. I'm relatively new to working with green stuff, so this is just kind of my first take on things and how I'm doing it now. I'm sure there's better ways. I've heard snakes and circles are the way to go. I've definitely done that before, but I find it a little bit less intuitive based on how I think about things. So this might take longer. This might not be efficient, but at the end of the day, I'm the one doing it, so it doesn't really matter. This is all just for my personal projects. This is not a detailed how-to of sculpting in green stuff or anything of the sort. Just me working on a Dreadnought for 10th edition. Sorry, if anyone's watching the VOD of this at some point in the future, I just kicked my tripod, so sorry about that. There we go. Yeah, that's coming along. Theoretically on Instagram, I have some followers who are probably awake right now, but once I get my streaming set up a little bit more figured out, I'll start posting there. And all these fingerprints are fine. Once once this hardens a little bit, we'll be able to smooth that out with our finger. And we shouldn't need to worry too much. And if it's really bad after the green stuff cures, we can always go in with sandpaper and take it off, or even just the side of the X-Acto knife. That's usually good enough. Just getting in that shape and making sure that everything's stuck down. Now looking at the crux terminatus, so from the image I'm looking at, my edges are flared out way too much. It's much more of a cross shape and much less of this weird thing I've got going here. So thankfully that's an easy fix. You can just take those in and then press it down. And work on bringing this back together. Kind of like that. The hardest part of this is going to be those little skeleton bones. I guess all bones are skeleton bones, but little cross bones coming out of the center in between these cross parts. That will be a little bit tricky given their size. Okay. A little bit more green stuff here. Let's do the same thing for this one. Smoosh it in a little bit and then build back the shape. When you see me going in with my finger, what I'm doing is pressing down on the green stuff and trying to both flatten it out and usually push it in one direction or the other, just to get the shape a little bit more even and to make sure the height doesn't build up too much in any one area. Might not actually need to put on more green stuff. I should just be able to pull this out and turn this into the bottom part of the crux. There we go. So now it's a little bit high. It's a little bit too low for this part right here. So what we can do is just slowly work this back up, build back up our circular shape. Pull this out. We want to maintain this line here, this little panel line. So I'm using that as sort of my reference. And then up here, we've gone off the center. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping that in mind and pushing this generally just a little bit over. We want to make sure. Things that we can't do after it's cured easily are things like change the center point. So right now, these two dots being the middle, I really want to make sure that I'm keeping things right in the middle as much as I can, because that will be one of the things that really stands out, especially on the Primaris models. These are so futuristic and so geometric in how they're designed that any kind of break to the symmetry of the model or the way it's designed will generally stick out a lot in my experience. I think the top needs a little bit more green stuff just to, that's too much, maybe a little bit less. Yeah, so I'm just gonna keep doing this. If anyone stumbles upon this VOD, well, one, I hope you enjoy it. My goal is to turn things like this into actual videos as I go on, but while I'm getting the hang of content production, live streaming seemed fun. So, just keep working at it, and we can see now, we're still not there. Things are still a little bit wonky, our sizes are off, but we're starting, slowly, we're starting to get the shape of the crux terminatus. And that's good, because I wasn't sure if it would work. I think I've been struggling with in the hobby. I'm gonna ramble a little bit, but a thing that I've been struggling with in the hobby is the prevalence of 3D printing. And it's not that I don't like 3D printing. I had a 3D printer for a while before I moved to an apartment. And in my current apartment, I definitely can't use it. It would stink up the place way too much with resin. My apartment is pretty tiny, and I just don't want that. But it's more so that 3D printing allows you to kind of do anything, and it allows you to kind of do anything really pretty easily. You don't actually, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. There we go. So you don't actually have to be an amazing painter or sculptor to be able to make a really good looking mini with 3D printed parts. You could have a super thematic Dreadnought or Terminator, kind of whatever you want to, using cheaply or freely available 3D printed parts. And that's really cool. And I like that a lot. My Raven Guard, for example, I'll have 3D printed beaky helmets because GEW wants me to pay an absorbent amount of money for those, and I'm just not having that. But one thing I found for my own personal projects is that while I could 3D print a Crux Terminatus or buy one off of Shapeways or whatever, there's just something different about hand sculpted add-ons. They don't feel the same. A 3D printed part looks great. It looks like it's something GW made in a lot of cases. They look really nice. But I think having that personal touch of green stuff work really adds to a model on the tabletop. And especially in a universe like 40K, where things are kind of old, decrepit, beaten down, grimdark, whatever you want to call it. having that touch of imperfection, of something you did, I think really adds to the character of it. Like a Space Marine. That Crux Terminatus that's on the Dreadnought, that's going to be something that was presumably either sculpted on by an artisan in universe. It's not going to be some mass-produced object in the 40k verse just because of the scarcity of Dreadnoughts and the scarcity of, I mean, if we're going by the Emperor's armors and all the Crux Terminatuses, by the scarcity of the Emperor's armor. And having it be a little bit imperfect and a little bit handmade in feeling, I think adds a lot to the model. And it also gives you a little bit of something to be proud of. Because even if it's not perfect, whenever I finish sculpting or doing something a little bit outside of the box for Warhammer, I always look back at those models. And even if the paint job's not my best, or if they were done, you know, a while ago and I've changed a lot as a painter, I always look back at those and appreciate the effort that I put in to get that conversion, to get that green stuff, to get it looking kind of the way I wanted it to. So I think this is a very fun process, and it allows us to embrace a little bit of imperfection and of doing things just because we want to, and not necessarily worrying about the end result too much. You know, obviously we don't want it to look bad, but I think it's easier than you think to get good looks with green stuff. It just takes time and patience. In my case, I'm not actually using green stuff. I'm using Tamiya Epoxy Putty Smooth type. So they have two. They have a smooth type and a quick type. And the curing time on the quick type is pretty fast, probably within 4 hours. But it is just a nightmare to work with. It is the stickiest, goopiest stuff. I used to sculpt with that a little bit for my Raven Guard, and things like hair were all sculpted with that. And while you can get good looks eventually, it's just a nightmare. I don't recommend it. It's really good for adding magnets to bases or anything where you just need putty as filler, because it dries so quickly. So if you're looking into that, I believe they're the same price. And that's Tamiya Epoxy Putty. The smooth type, from what I can tell, works identically to green stuff. And we're just going to keep just messing around with the shape. You know, if you spend a lot of time painting, especially doing things like non-metallic metals or more extreme lighting situations, you'll be used to just pushing around a shape to kind of get it to look right. I think here, yeah, that's not bad. I'm almost happy with that. And again, we'll keep refining this as we go on. Right now, we're just trying to get it good enough where we can start laying in more details and not need to worry about this shape changing too dramatically. We're just trying to get it into position. And yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there. You know, if I had to guess, this Crux Terminatus alone is going to be the bulk of one hobby session, maybe two. I don't know exactly how far I'll be able to get in before I need to wait for the green stuff to cure. I'm just kind of going at it. I don't have a solid plan. Thankfully, this is a established in-universe thing, so there's a lot of very good art and very good sculpts of it online for me to copy. I have another part of this Dreadnought that I'll be working on, which is more of taking the freehand I did for my Blade Guard Captain, taking that freehand and turning that into a sculpted on detail. So that will be a little bit difficult. That's going to be basically an angel with wings, and we will see how that one goes when we get there. But first this, just getting our feet wet, getting some positive momentum into the project. I've been in non-metallic metal hell for the past week, and I wanted to do something a little bit different today. I've finally gotten to the point where non-metallic metal is not frustrating, but more of a fun process, where thinking about the lighting and the highlights and just gradually building up all of my highlights and shadows works. And, that's after a year and a half or so of trying non-metallic metal across all of my various models. But it takes a while. It's a difficult process at the best of time. But I think once you get into the swing of it and you get a better understanding of how metal reacts to light. Because I think we all know when something looks metallic, but I think it's difficult to actually think about it. I know I've had several different revelation moments in non-metallic metal where I found that my process changed dramatically based on something new I tried or some way of approaching it. And I think that's just because we take what we see for granted. Every day I see however many reflective metal objects in my life, and I know they're metal. I know when I look at it that it's metal, but I don't really stop and think about why it reads as metal. And ever since I started getting into miniature painting, and specifically non-metallic metals, that's been something I pay more and more attention to in my daily life. And I think sculpting is sort of the same way. There's a lot of moments where you kind of realize, oh, okay, this technique works. This is what I should be doing. And you can watch tutorials and YouTube videos. I've watched my fair share of how to sculpt things, and I've tried different sculpting projects and whatnot. And nothing beats just picking up some green stuff and going at it. You can watch however many videos you want, but at the end of the day, it's just going to be your brush time, your sculpting time, that really determines what you can do. And it really doesn't matter how good or bad your first couple of sculpts are. It's all part of the learning process. And even if you're not happy with it, like even if this doesn't look how I want it to, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, this is something personal I did to my minis, and it's going to make my Dreadnought stand out on the tabletop. It's going to be a focal point, and I can understand the fear of having a focal point turn out badly, of not wanting to risk however many dollars you spent on this turning out bad on the tabletop if painting and having your army look a certain way matters to you. But at the same time, the worst case scenario, especially on a Primaris model like this, is that you're just going to take your X-Acto knife and you're going to scrape off the green stuff, and it's going to leave behind a relatively smooth surface, and if it's not smooth, you can fix it with sandpaper. It's a really low risk situation, with I think very high rewards even for minimal effort. Keep poking. Keep poking, keep refining. One thing I don't like about Tamiya epoxy putty is that it's very white, and I'm sure you can see that in the picture here. It's very white, and it's not a problem when you're working with it, but it is a problem when you use white blue tack for everything around you. There has been more than one occasion where I have grabbed a ball of what I thought to be epoxy putty and mixed it up with the activator, only to realize that I have just mixed blue tack and epoxy activator together. And, well, it's a waste of blue tack and it's a waste of epoxy activator. Nothing bad happens, but it's just a waste of money. And if you happen to have sculpted your suppressor sergeant's hair out of that mixture, only to come back after work and realize, hey, this hair hasn't cured, what gives? Well, you're in for a surprise and another evening of sculpting. Taking it back and forth. When you have excess like that, you can definitely use the X-Acto knife to pick it up, or you can do what I did and just scrape at it. We're at the point now where this is still soft enough where it doesn't really matter. It's very forgiving at this stage. It's very sticky, so we need to be a little bit careful, but that also lets us push things around and mold things a little bit more gingerly. You can see that I'm switching back and forth here between the little ball and the big ball, just trying to get things pushed and pulled into the right shape. The little ball is definitely better for a lot of the tight edge work I'm trying to do here, even though we're still just in the early stages of refining the shape. We want to make sure that we're, not going too rough. I think even in painting, there's merit to going rough on your early coats and early stages, but I typically find the more effort I put into my base coats, or, well, actually, I don't really base coat, but the more effort I put into my value sketch or my initial painting sketch, the more the process will just come naturally. If I just cover something in a single color, or in this case, if I just kind of half-ass a shape, I think it makes the whole process more difficult. And it feels less fun to me. I like going at it as if the next push could be my last. And I know it's not going to be. We're still pretty rough in, but I like to think about it as if I'm almost always done. Or always almost close to being done. Even if I'm not. It's just a mindset that helps me get good results, I think. And you might be different. But I know that for me, if I check out, then I tend not to put in a lot of effort, or I make mistakes. I stop thinking critically, I just kind of do. And I don't really enjoy that. I'm fine with making errors when I'm trying my best, but I don't like making errors out of my own carelessness. It feels bad. Because at that point, there's no one to blame but myself. There's nothing to do but say, if I had been more careful, I could have fixed it, but I wasn't. And that's not, it is learning. It is learning, but it's not the kind of learning I enjoy doing. I would much rather learn from trial and error of working at my best than learning that I messed up because I wasn't working hard enough or wasn't working the right way. One of the things I do in my personal life is Iaido, which is martial art of drawing a sword. And one of the things I learned quickly from that is how to gauge your ability. And I'm sure anyone who does sports or martial arts or even paints, you kind of know. You get a feeling of how aware you are of something as you're doing it. With the Iaido, since you're drawing a sword, there's definitely a risk of getting yourself cut. And knowing if the way you're practicing is conducive to getting cut is always a good way of preventing yourself from getting cut. knowing if you're hungry or tired or you're thinking about something else, if you're distracted. And I think miniature painting has a decent amount of that. You know, there's definitely days and times where I want to work on a specific part of a project, and days and times I don't. Today, I feel like if I worked on non-metallic metal, I would get frustrated with it, I wouldn't enjoy it, and I would get frustrated with the mini as a result of that. So I'm not doing that. Instead, I'm doing something completely different. A nice palette cleanser. One of the channels I love most on YouTube is Tabletop Minions, and I just love watching Uncle Adam go on about the different elements of the hobby, because I think at the end of the day, hobbies are something we really get a lot out of. More so than jobs in academics. Hobbies are something, to me, it's something I can excel at for no other reason than I want to excel at it. No one's gonna come and tell me my minis aren't good enough. No one's gonna, my pay and life quality isn't going to change based on how good my minis are. What is gonna change is how good my minis are. That's it. Just a small amount of pride I get from the result of my work. And I really like that. I really like that feeling of being able to do something well and put a lot of time and effort into something for no other reason than I want to. Because at the end of the day, does anyone care that I spent however long this is taking streaming and talking to myself about a Crux Terminatus I'm sculpting onto a Dreadnought? No. No, they don't. And that's exactly why I love it. Because it doesn't matter that I'm sitting here alone in the stream at DGen hours when everyone else is asleep because I live in Asia. And my dog is looking at me weirdly because I'm talking to myself. None of that matters. It's all fun. It's all good. Because I'm doing this because I want to. And I think, as someone who loved watching Bob Ross, and really gets into the joy of painting, being sort of the master of your own little world, you know, in this case, the master of my own chapter of Space Marines, even if it's, you know, pretty heavily covered in the lore chapter like the Dark Angels, but just, this, you know, these are mine. This is my troop. Whatever else is going on in the world, there's all sorts of terrible things going on every day in the world these days. I don't think it's anything new. I think the world's always had a lot of terrible stuff going on constantly, but the internet definitely puts us a lot closer to it. I don't live in the US, but I certainly feel the mass shootings and everything that's happening there. It's where I'm from, and even if I'm far away, it's hard not to think about it. It's hard not to feel the negativity of everything going on. And that's fine. But give yourself some time. Paint some happy little army men, or some angry little army men. Let the grim darkness of the 41st millennia give you a little bit of a respite from the grim darkness of real life. Just a little bit. Just enough to put things into perspective. Because there are still a lot of good things out there, and a lot of fun things, and a lot of things you can do for yourself. And it's taken me a long time to realize that. I put a lot of time into painting during the pandemic, and I'm sort of finally coming out of that period of my life. I've moved on in a lot of different areas, and it feels really good. It definitely was a once-in-a-lifetime learning experience of how am I when there's no one else around? What is important to me when it's only me? And painting gave me a lot for that. A very good teacher I had. Sadly, he passed away a while ago, but a very good teacher I had told me, character is who you are when no one else is around. And during the pandemic especially, I thought about that quite a bit. When it was just me, who am I? What do I value? Those are the kinds of things that I really stopped to ask myself, given that all I had was time and ample space to talk to myself. What was I doing with my pandemic? What was I doing with this gift of personal time? Sure, there's definitely the curse of no social interaction, and that was crushing. It really, really was crushing for me. But what did I do to try to make the most of it? And the answer was painting. There's a ton of other life skills I could have had, a ton of other career-oriented things or goal-oriented things I could have been doing, and I didn't. I didn't do anything. I didn't get my master's, I didn't study a second language, I didn't learn any practical life skills, but I did learn a lot about myself through hobbying. I learned a lot about persevering and enduring, and a thing that I think we all learned, and we really shouldn't undervalue this. We learned how to be okay with a completely shit situation that we had nothing to do with and had no help with. There's nothing we could have done about it other than follow the rules, get vaxxed, and then wait. You know, we were helpless to a decent degree. And even if you don't believe in whatever nonsense people spout about the pandemic, it sucked for everyone. And hopefully we can all learn something from it, because if we didn't, well then it's just 3 wasted years. But if we did, who knows, maybe we can all just get a little bit better as people. We can all just learn a little bit about ourselves. Take away something good. Even if it's just an appreciation of how bad it was. Just so we can appreciate our day-to-day lives more. I know I do. Now that I can actually go about and do things, I know that I'm just loving it. Actually being able to go out and meet people. Do things again. Now, the country I live in also was a lot stricter. It's not China, but it was a lot stricter than the U.S. Pandemic policies continued here well after they ended in the U.S., so I might sound like it's kind of over relatively recently, but that's kind of because it was over relatively recently. At least for me. Yeah, there we go. We're getting there. Slowly, but surely, we're getting there. I like it. I like the direction we're going. This bottom part, just to be a little bit bigger so we can just squish it down, and then shape it up. Yeah, these don't all need to be the exact same shape. My dog has arisen. It's been rainy outside and he's been sleeping on the sofa until just now. And now he's pacing around, probably wanting me to sit with him. So, once I get the final details etched into that, I'll probably take him up on that invitation. despite having, I'll be honest, I don't know anything about YouTube. I don't know anything about streaming. I'm on here, I'm doing it. Twitch is probably the way to go. I'll probably try this on Twitch next time, now that I've got the setup sort of going. But, you know, it's therapeutic just to sit here and talk into a camera. And this will be out there. Someone might stumble upon it. Who knows? That's kind of the nice thing about the internet. Everyone can throw their voice into the void. Assuming Google servers are running, maybe someday someone will stumble upon my channel. And something I said will resonate with them. Who knows? There we go. I think with that, we're getting pretty close. I've got the rough shape of the crux outlined here. I think the height is actually pretty good. So now what we need to do is take a very fine sculpting tool. If I had one, I would use a dental pick, but I don't. I only have an X-Acto knife. And what we need to do is just start going at that circle on the inside. Before we do that, I'm just going to burnish this down with my finger, just to smooth it out a little bit. And you can see as we do that, the areas where it's not quite the shape we want it. So we can mess around with it a little bit. And, you know, this is really an endless kind of task, but in terms of getting the shape locked in, I think that's pretty good for now. It's good enough where we can start adding in more details and refining things. So, the next step is that you can see this is not completely flat. And so I'm going to wet my X-Acto knife and then just cut off the top of this in a couple of passes. Just so we can have a better surface to work with and less material to worry about. That should be fine. Drop some floor. Yeah, okay. So, now that we've removed some stock, we can just take the knife again, or not the knife, a little sculpting jig, and just go in. And you can also see now areas where the shape is not exactly where we wanted. It's still close. This is good. This is pretty good. We're just a little bit off. We're just bringing this around and sort of making these little crescents. We'll get it back to where it was pretty quickly. Yeah. Overall, it's looking pretty good. I definitely understand why someone would want to 3D print this. This is not, you know, this is not the most exhilarating process or the easiest process, and just super gluing a crux terminatus on. Yeah, there's a nice feeling to that of just being able to do it and have it done. But we'll see. You know, when I finish this, will I think I should have learned a 3D model and just done this myself, or just gone on cults and printed something for free? We'll see. Like I said, I typically find that whenever I sculpt something, I almost always like the end result. there have been very few things that I've sculpted that I've been kind of opposed to in any way. Even the more, if you look at my Instagram, there's a Buddhist monk I tried to sculpt a while ago, and I think he looks pretty good. He doesn't have hands yet, and he's not painted because he doesn't have hands, and I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to sculpt his hands because hands are just the worst. Just like non-metallic metal, you know what hands look like, and you pretty much immediately recognize when something doesn't look like hands. Your brain's good at knowing when things are human and when they're not. Now this stock removal step I keep doing here could probably be prevented by better planning and better technique than what I have. But, well, here we are. There's definitely a method of this where you don't put on as much epoxy putty up front, and you work in smaller layers, building it up to be the shape you want, and you don't have to do all this cleanup and spend as much time on this. But that is for a wiser man than me. Yeah, that's not bad. We're getting there. Every little swipe of this spudger gets us one step closer to being done. We'll get there eventually. And I'm not in any rush. This is the fun time. This is my relaxing after work time. I think this is good enough to go for a really fine edge now. Those last couple of details in. I'm not sure exactly how I want to go about it from here. Potentially, I'll keep working on this while it's wet to get those circles in. But it's almost better to have a save point and to let the epoxy putty cure from here, and then just go in with really tiny ropes of green stuff to work on the circle and add to this. That way I have a firm underlayer and a firm shape to kind of build off of. I think that's probably what I'm going to do at this point, is just get this cross finished up, and then once the cross is finished, just let it cure, or mostly cure, and then come back in and add the next couple of layers, which will be the circles, the crossbones, and the skull. The crossbones and skull probably need to go on last. Skulls aren't too bad to do with green stuff. They're a relatively simple shape. Getting the teeth can be a bit of a pain. But green stuff is actually a relatively forgiving material to work with. Especially because it gets easier to work with as it hardens. At least in my experience. Doing finer and finer adjustments gets easier over time. I was about to say I don't have a ton of experience doing green stuff work, but in reality I do. At least minor stuff. I've been sculpting green stuff since I first got into the hobby. Pretty much all of my main minis have some level of green stuff work on them. From anything as small as hair up to, you know, my demon prince for my first 1,000 Suns team. Okay, Eddie.